Hello students, so you are most welcome is in today's class. So students, is in today's class we are going to study about the topic that is we call the nutrition, right? So under this topic students will be studying about the topic like nutrition is in detail. Under this topic here we have the plant and animal nutrition, so we'll study these two things is in detailed manner. So let me take you further here, and as in this slide students we are having 4 points, so let me explain you one by one. As we know student, nutrition is the process by which an organism, or you can see every organism basically uses food to support its life. So nutrition is very important for every single organism, right? So it includes the use of different elements and substances is in the food and further utilized by the organism is in the further development and growth of the organism body, right? It helps to provide energy and then further carry out the different biological functions or the process, you can say, right? Here we have the process of the nutrition that includes food intake, assimilation, absorption, biosynthesis, catabolism and excretion. So these are the further process that's basically happens, right? So let me tell you a few things here. The new term can be, this term can be new for you, the assimilation. When we say the assimilation, so we'll be studying about the assimilation later on is in the later on slide, but let me tell you the meaning of the assimilation here. So assimilation is a kind of combination of the two process, right, to supply of animal cells with like nutrients. So that's we call the assimilation, right? So absorption is there, so it's very simple, right? Then we have next one, that is we call the biosynthesis. What is we call what's the meaning of the biosynthesis, right? So biosynthesis is a kind of like, we'll say, the production of the complex molecule within the living organism or the cell. That's we call the biosynthesis. And here the catabolism basically mean to say breakdown of the molecule. Then finally the excretion comes, right students? So here we have the next thing, which is we call the nitrogen cycle. So that's very important. So we should know, we must understand how the nitrogen cycle works and how, like because see, nitrogen is a plentiful like gas is in the earth atmosphere. That's around 78%, right, is in the total atmosphere. It's available around 78%. So we should know how it helps is in the further nutrition process of every organism, right? So here the nutrition of organisms requires several elements, that's we know, right? So that are known as the micronutrients. Okay students, so these are the micronutrients that require for like every single organism. Okay, so these elements required is in the very small quantities but are very important to different biological process. So yeah, it's required is in small quantities, but it is very important for every biological functions. And these includes oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen and sulfur, etc. Okay, so isn't that nitrogen is quite plentiful is in the earth atmosphere, but very few plants can use this directly. So that's like surprising. Nitrogen available is in the atmosphere, that's like full of plentiful, you can say, but the plants, or you can say the animal also, they cannot take directly the atmospheric like nitrogen directly. So that's like what we call different thing. Okay, so we'll be studying that is in how the cycle works. So that's a very important thing. But before that, as you can see is in this adjoining picture here. Okay, so this picture tells you the whole cycle of the nitrogen. So isn't it basically, as you can see, this is the atmosphere, this thing. Okay, isn't it like 78% of the nitrogen is available here? So this nitrogen comes out by the help of the nitrogen fixation bacteria. Okay, and because of that reason, because of that thing, there are some fixation bacteria is there, or sometimes because of the lightning, so we get the nitrogen is in the earth. Then after the whole process works, and then the whole cyclic process basically works. So I'll explain the whole thing, how the things basically work, so is in the later slide. So let me take you further so that you can able to understand, right? So first of all, let me explain you here these points, then after I'll explain you how the nitrogen cycle basically works. Okay, so first of all, students, here the nitrogen compounds that's required by like every plants, you can say, to be present is in the soil is in which they grow. Mean to say, so mean to say what, nitrogen compounds are required by every plants, okay, to be present is in the soil. So the most important question arises in your mind, how the nitrogen can like mix up is in the soil. That's important question, right? Okay, so here we have the next point. So the amount of largely inert atmospheric nitrogen is converted is in a nitrogen fixation. So your answer will be by the help of the nitrogen fixation process. So the atmospheric nitrogen comes is in the earth. Okay, by the help of, that's we call the nitrogen fixation process to give rise of the biologically usable forms. Okay, then we have here, this is done by the bacteria. There is a kind of bacteria. Okay, because of the help of these bacteria, like we get like the fixation of the like nitrogen happens is in the earth or is in the soil. Okay, then we have here the nitrogen is taken up by the plants. So then after what happens when the fixation happens, there is in the earth or soil, you can say. So these nitrogen basically further taken by plants, and this nitrogen further utilized by the various process as it is incorporated. So that's very important into further for the production of amino acid, nucleic acid and chlorophyll is in the plant. Okay, so the basically plants are then further eaten by the animals, right? So whatever the nitrogen being transported is in the you can say the plants. Okay, then further when the animals will eat like that those plants. Okay, so the same nitrogen will further moves to the animal body. Okay, so is in this way you can like try to understand how the chain basically works. Okay, so the plants are eaten by the animals and the nitrogen compounds such as amino acid etc enters the animals is in this manner. Finally, when the plants and animals die, the various micronutrients are returned into say here to the soil, and whenever the plants and animals die, so the various micronutrients, okay, that's further returned to the soil, mean to say that's further like comes back is in the soil. So is in this way you can try to understand how the cyclic process of the nitrogen basically working here. Thus we'll say there is a cyclic movement of the nitrogen from atmosphere into the biological components, that's animals or the plants, and back to the atmosphere, then further it comes again is in the atmosphere. So this cyclic movement is known as the nitrogen cycle. Okay, so that's very important. So let me take you further, students. Here we have the complete nitrogen cycle is in this slide, so please pay your attention and try to understand the nitrogen cycle, how it's work. Okay, so first of all let me tell you, as we know the nitrogen basically present is in the atmosphere, that is around 78% of the total gas, right? So first of all the question arises here, how this nitrogen comes is in the soil. Okay, so there are various methods. So that's the first method is we call that nitrogen fixation. Okay, that can happen because of like lightning. Okay, because of the lightning, that's the first thing, and the second thing can be here because of the fixing bacteria. So nitrogen fixing bacteria are there, that's present is in the soil. Okay, so with the help of these bacteria, so they basically fix the atmospheric nitrogen inside the soil. Okay, and is in the legume plants basically, that's we call the leguminous plants. Okay, so is in the nodules of the plants there are some like bacteria. Okay, so that's having the kind of properties in them, they fixes the atmospheric nitrogen is in the soil. Okay, so is in this way these nitrogen basically fixes is in the soil. Okay, so is in this way basically as you can see here the flow chart of this like cyclic process. So this is the lightning, or you can say fixing bacteria. So that's basically fixing the atmospheric nitrogen is in the soil, is in the form of the ammonia sometimes, is in the form of the nitrate sometimes. Okay, and then this ammonia further because of the further nitrification, so there are some nitrifying bacteria are there. So because of the nitrifying bacteria, so this ammonia further converted is in the usable form of the plants and further like animals, of course. So that's like we call nitrate and nitrite. Okay, so this nitrite further like happens because of the further nitrifying bacteria. Okay, that's we call the nitrification process, right? So then further as you can see, so these are the cycle here. So then further as you can see these nitrate, okay, these nitrate with the help of the assimilation process, so these nitrates taken by the plants, and then when the plants eaten by these animals, okay, so the same nitrogen goes to the animal body, and then when the animals will die, okay, so the same nitrogen again comes is in the form of the animal waste, and after like that is another process that's we call the ammonification, And the ammonification is it's a kind of like production of the ammonia, you can say, when the plants or the animal basically they die. Okay, so that's comes again is in the form of the ammonia. So is in this way you can see the whole process is in the cyclic chain. Okay, and here these thing, that's nitrate, because of some like bacteria, okay, because of some bacteria, that's we call the denitrifying bacteria. Okay, so because of the help of this some bacteria, that's we call the denitrifying. So these nitrate further like transferred further like moves to the atmosphere. So is in this way whole chain is there, and this chain further we call the nitrogen cycle. Okay, so I hope that is in this way you hope like you all have understood how the nitrogen cycle basically works. So let me take you further. So here you have like you can see the picture of the legume plants. So these are the legume plants, that's basically pea plants, you can see here is of the picture. So is in the legume plants basically student, these are the basically nodules of the plants, right? That is in the root. Okay, so is in the nodules of these kind of plants basically there is a special kind of bacteria that's we call the rhizobia. Okay, so that's having the kind of symbiosis relationship between the plants and the, of course, with the rhizobia and the plants, there is a kind of symbiosis relation. That's mean to say give and take relationship between the plants and the legume, the bacteria and the legume plants. Okay, so what is the function of this bacteria that's present is in the nodules? Basically they convert atmospheric nitrogen is in the form of the usable one, and then plants basically take those nitrogen and is in the revolt of that thing. So plants like give like slaughter and the energy food, okay, to these bacteria. Okay, so here as you can see again we have the same nitrogen cycle process is there. So you can see the nitrogen fixation is there, that's basically is in the form of the ammonia, that's NH3 here. Then ammonia oxidation, because of the ammonia oxidation, that's there is a next one that's we call the nitrate oxidation. Okay, nitrate and nitrites is there. Okay, then further the whole process works in denitrifying bacteria, because of that the same nitrogen further goes to the atmosphere. Okay, so this thing as we have studied is in the previous slide and is in this present slide is totally we call like the whole nitrogen cycle, and how the atmospheric nitrogen comes is in the soil, then to the plants, then to the animal body, then again to the atmosphere. Okay, so let me take you further students. Now we have the next heading that's we call the modes of the nutrition. Okay, so under the modes of the nutrition, so I'll be explaining here this is basically of two things here. First we call the autotrophic nutrition, okay, and the second we call the heterotrophic nutrition. So basically we can say here nutrition of like basically two types, autotrophic and heterotrophic. Okay, so let me explain the first thing about the autotrophic nutrition, right? So the autotrophic nutrition basically takes place is in the organisms that are able to manufacture their own food. So these are those kind of organisms basically those are able to manufacture their own foods from simpler inorganic compounds, right? So the biological process that is involved is in the autotrophic modes of the nutrition is we call photosynthesis. And who can do the photosynthesis? Photosynthesis can be done by the plants only, that's we know. Okay, so what the function of the plants here? So they take basically inorganic, or you can say what we call that's basically inorganic compounds. With the help of the inorganic compounds basically they produce energy with the help of course photosynthesis. So as you can see this plant here, these plants taking the inorganic basically compounds and of course the light energy. With the help of these things the plants basically prepare food is in the form of the sugar, or you can say the glucose. Okay, so here we have the next thing that's we call the autotrophic nutrition. Further it's divided is in two way, that is we call the photoautotrophic nutrition, and next we have that's we call the chemioautotrophic nutrition. Okay, when we say the photoautotrophic nutrition, basically its meaning here the mode of nutrition is photoautotrophic is in the nature. Okay, that's mean to have photo arise from the word that's we call the light, right? So it occurs is in the presence of the sun, or you can say the presence of the light or solar energy. It takes place is in plants only, right? That's we call the photoautotropic nutrition. And here we have the next one. So isn't that you can see here the mode of nutrition that takes place is in the absence of the light energy, that's we call the chemioautotropic nutrition. Isn't this process students basically the organic compounds are produced from the oxidation of the chemicals, right? So it takes place is in the bacteria. So that's very important. So let me take you further, students. Now we have the heterotropic nutrition. So the heterotropic nutrition further divided is in the three form. First we have the consumers, second we have that's we call the saprotropes, and third we have that's we call the deritovores. Okay, so these are the three things basically. When we say the consumers, so under the consumers heading we have here, consumer mean to say here that's basically consumes the organic matter, okay, which is plant or animals that is living or recently killed. That's we call the consumers here, and that comes further herbivores, carnivores, and scavengers. Okay, so it is again further divided is in the three category: herbivores, okay, that's plant eating; carnivores, flesh eating; and scavengers. So that's after like when the animals die, so scavengers, the function of the scavengers comes basically. Okay, so that's the first thing, consumers. Then we have the next one, you can say, you can mark it first one. Then we have the second one, that's we call the deritivores. So when we say the deritivores, basically it's basically consumes the degrades or non-living organic matter. So that's, you can have the example of the earthworm. Okay, that comes under this category, right? So next we have here that's we call the saprotropes. So here this saprotrope basically comes under feeding on the non-living organic matter, that's bacteria and fungi is there. Okay, so let me take you further, students. Now so we'll be studying is in detail manner about this thing here. So here we have the types of nutrition. Okay, so is in this, first we have the nutrition is in plants. Okay, so in plants the process of the nutrition is autotropic. Okay, so they are able to prepare, how the autotropic basically works. So they are able to prepare their own food through the process of photosynthesis. Okay, in this process the inorganic compounds are used to make complex sugar compounds. So that's we call the autotrophs. Okay, or autotropic, right? So nutrition is in the animals. So here under this heading, nutrition is in the animals. How this work basically? Okay, so animals we know that cannot produce their own food. Okay, and for energy what they do, they are dependent on the other organisms for the food basically. Sometimes they depend on the other animal, or sometimes they depend on like the plants. Okay, so next we have, students, here the nutrition is in the plants, right? So we know that the plants make their own food by the process of the photosynthesis, and is in this process different inorganic simple compounds such as we can say the water is there, carbon dioxide, solar energy or the light energy are further used to produce the complex organic compounds. Okay, so this reaction tells you the whole thing. As you can see, we have the carbon dioxide, 6 molecule of the carbon dioxide, that's basically. Okay, then we have 6 of the hydrogen oxide, that's water. With the help of the light, or you can say with the help of the that's we call the solar energy, and of course the chlorophyll, with the help of the chlorophyll further production of the sugar is there. Okay, so that's basically C6H12O6 plus oxygen. So this is the kind of process basically happens is in the plants. So let me take you further now, students. We have the next one that's we call the nutrition is in animals. Okay, so it is basically of three types. The first one we call the holozoic nutrition. Okay, so under this holozoic nutrition, students, it's a kind of nutrition is in which the living organism consume food by ingestion of the solid material. Okay, that's food then digested further and absorbed is into the cell. So here we have the examples, that's animals and humans comes is in the same category, right? So we have the next one that's we call the saprophytism. When we say the saprophytism, so basically it's those kind of organism that feed on the decaying and the dead matter. Okay, as you can see, we have the best example of the mushroom or the fungi or the bacteria. Okay, so the complex, isn't it basically the complex organic material are further broken down into the simpler substances. Okay, so here we have the bacteria and the fungi is there. Okay, then we have that's we call the parasite or the parasitism. Okay, so these organisms basically get nutrition by the living or is in the body of the host, right? So it's we call the parasite basically, this organism known as parasite. Okay, sometimes this organism present is in the human intestine as well. So they causes disease and even death of the organism. So here we have the example of the tapeworm in the flesh is the example of the parasites basically. So let me take you further now, students. We have very important heading that's we call the alimentary system. how the alimentary system basically, and what is the alimentary system. So let me explain that, right? So under the first point here, we have the alimentary tract of the digestive system extends from the mouth to the anus, right? So we know that student is in the alimentary, when we say the alimentary system, so it's basically start from the mouth till the anus. Okay, so it's consists of the different parts such as a pharynx, okay, esophagus, so that's we have like pharynx and esophagus, stomach, small and large intestine, rectum and anus. So these are the different parts of the alimentary system, or you can say sometimes we call that alimentary canal as well. Okay, so food is ingested through the mouth, okay, then further it is masticated, it is chewed by the teeth, of course. Okay, that's we call the breakdown is into simpler parts. Then further this is again broken down to liberate energy and nutrients as like when it's basically absorbed, right? And then finally the waste material comes then excreted through the anus as a feces. So as in this way the whole alimentary system, that's basically works, like these parts basically of the alimentary system works. Okay, so let me take you further. So isn't it, as you can see, these are the different like insect and like kind of creature, okay, that's process the same kind of alimentary system is in their body, of course, from the mouth to anus. So let me take you and explain you how the parts of the alimentary system basically work. Okay, so the alimentary system of the organism, students, contain the mouth, esophagus, stomach, small and large intestine, okay, and anus is there, right? So let me tell you the first thing here, the mouth. So what is the function of mouth? So it is also known as the oral cavity basically, right, or buccal cavity sometimes. Through this opening or aperture, you can say the animals take in food. It is the cavity lying is at the upper end of the alimentary canal, right? So the alimentary canal is bounded further on the outside of the lips, of course, and inside the, that's we call the pharynx. Okay, it contains the tongue and teeth is in the higher animals like human or any animals that comes under the higher category. Okay, so this is we call the mouth. So next we have that's esophagus. So esophagus basically it is a tubular organ, you can say, is in the organism through which the food passes, right? So it's a tubular organs we basically from where the tube is basically like from where the like food passes through. Okay, and then further it goes to the stomach from the pharynx. Okay, then we have the stomach. So it is a muscular hollow organ basically, is in the many animals including several invertebrates, right? It basically involved the second phase of digestion, you can say, and perform a chemical breakdown here with the help of the acid, that's sometimes acid and enzymes also there. So that's we call the hydrochloric acid and enzymes. Okay, so with the help of these chemicals, you can say the breakdown of the food is there. Okay, then we have the intestine. So is in the lower organism, so a simple intestine may be present, but is in the higher organism, the intestine is a complex structure. Okay, and it's divided is into small and the large intestine. Most of the absorption of the nutrients and minerals from the like food takes place basically is in the small intestine only, right? While the large intestine is in that basically the absorption of the water, or you can say that sometimes salt is there. Okay, so is in the large intestine the absorption of the water and salt is there. Okay, so that's absorbed is in the large intestine, and the waste material then further stored is in the feces form, that's for the further removal. Okay, so here we have the last one, that's we call the anus. So it is the end of the, that's we can say the digestive alimentary canal that helps to removal of the feces. Okay, so here you can see the comparative study, comparative labeling of the like three different creature including the human being as well. Okay, so as you can see the first one, the A1, that's we have human digestive system. So isn't it, you can see the small intestine is there, okay, large intestine is there, okay, stomach is there, and these are the other organs. This part we call from where the food basically passes through, that's we call the esophagus. Okay, so these are the comparative study, right, students? So isn't that, as you can see, we have other two creatures, right? The second one is rabbit digestive system, this one is a rabbit one, and this is we call the roosters or the cock of its digestive system, isn't it? As you can see, it's like don't present the stomach here, which is like quite different from the other these two, right? So let me take you further, students. Now here we have the feeding habits. Okay, so now we'll be studying about the feeding habits, so how the feeding habits basically work. So the process by which the organism basically, or typically animals, obtain their food is known as feeding, right? So the variety of activities that are included is in the getting or consuming food is known as feeding habits. So the variety of activities are there, right? So that's include is the getting or the consuming of food is there. It's depend on the type of the food as well as the organism that takes like taking this food basically. Okay, on this basis we can say the animals can be further divided is in three types or three category further, and that's we call the herbivore, carnivore, and we have the next one that is we call omnivore. So these are the further category of the animals. Okay, so first we'll be studying the herbivore. So what is we call the herbivore? So it is basically those kind of organism that eat and are dependent primarily basically only on the plant and plant based. So these are those kind of organisms that's primarily depend on the plant and the plant body. Okay, that's like you can say the plant based products. Okay, for their food requirement are known as the herbivores. Okay, are the herbivorous animals. Okay, so they bear mouth parts adapted to like rasping and grinding of the plant's material. So like how the nature has created to them, so they have the first they bear the mouth parts, of course they adapt by rasping and the grinding of the like plant material, of course, right? So they contain the certain chlorophyll digesting gut is in the bacteria or the protozoans one, and that helps to digest plant and matter, of course plant matter mean to say. Okay, so next we have the herbivores further consumes the autotrophs such as the plant, algae, photosynthetic bacteria. Okay, so next I'll take you further here, students. So next we have the another one that's we call the carnivore. So when we say the carnivore basically, so carnivores are the animals whose food and energy requirement are derived slowly, okay, basically from the animal tissue or the meat or the flesh. Okay, so they kill the organism through the hunting or may attain the flesh as a scavengers. Okay, so mouth parts and the digestive system is there, is suited for the digestion of the flesh eating animals. So as you can see is in this picture, so these are the carnivores animals. Okay, are the carnivores. Now we have the next one that's we call the omnivorous. So a human being also comes is in the same category. So omnivores basically those kind of animals have the ability to eat and survive on the both plant and animals, both, right, both matter. Okay, whichever may be which may be available. Okay, so they basically digest various nutrients, okay, such as the carbohydrates, protein, fat, fiber is in like there, of course, is in the body. Okay, is in the process of the digestion, they metabolize the nutrients, then further energy of the food is thereafter absorbed. Okay, so is in this way these type of animals as you can see is in this picture, so that's we call the omnivorous. Okay, students, so now let me take you further and let me explain you here the mechanism associated with the feeding habits. Okay, how the feeding habits basically work. So the process of the ingestion of the food or the taking of the food can be various types, right, which depends on the type of the food consumed by the organism, right? So the different mechanism associated with the feeding habits are here. Okay, so the first one is we call the filter feeding, second one we call the fluid feeding, third one we call the feeding insects is in the insects basically. Okay, so the next one we call here that's we call the saprophytic feeding and parasitic feeding. So these are the different type of feeding, students. So let me explain you. Each and every one is in this step-by-step learning mode. Okay, so first of all we call that the first one that's we call the filter feeding, how it's work basically. Okay, when we say the filter feeding, so it's basically those organisms that feed by straining suspended matter and food particles from the like water are known as suspension feeding animals. Okay, so next one here, they obtain their food, right, by passing the water over a specialized filtering structure they have. Okay, so these organisms play an important role is in the clarifying and cleaning the water. So that's the important one. So they are very often considered ecosystem engineers. So that's the way because of their like what we call their different modes of like feeding, we consider them as system engineers, right? So let me take you further. Now we have here the fluid feeding. Okay, so these are the organisms that you can see. These are the fluid feeding animals, or the organism, basically insect, right? So organisms basically that feed on the fluid, okay, of the other organisms are known as fluid feeders. Okay, and the mechanism is referred as to fluid feeding mechanism, right? So here we have the next point, that's basically these organisms feed on the nectar. Okay, as you can see the example of the bees, of course, right? Plant sap, blood of other organisms as well. So these are, we call the fluid feeding creature. Okay, so feeding is in the insects, right? So that's the next one. So under that insects, we know that insects feed on a variety of the organic as well as inorganic substances, right? So they bear mouth parts that are well accustomed for sucking, piercing, and or we can sometimes call the penetrate solid substances. So they have a different features, right, is in them. So the different forms of the mouth parts are used for biting, and grinding solid food are common is in the insects. Okay, so the piercing, sucking and sucking mouth parts have a stylus. Okay, so they are used to penetrate the solid tissue to the stuck up further, like suck up the liquid food basically from the other plants or the other organism, of course. Isn't the most Diptera mouth parts are like used to sponge and suck liquids and lack stylus. Okay, so that's basically sometimes isn't the most Diptera mouth parts are used to sponge, suck liquids, lack stylus. Basically among species that's we call the Lepidoptera, that's mouth parts lack stylus and are used to suck liquids, right? So here we have the next one, that's we call the saprophytic feeding. So these are those organism students that obtain nutrients by the consuming decomposing dead plants, right? Or you can say the animal matter are known as saprophages. Okay, and the feeding mechanism is known as saprophytic feeding. Okay, so some examples of the saprophytic organism are here sedentary polychaetas, okay, such as amphitrite. Okay, that's basically amphitrite worms and family of the terribellate. Okay, and further other terribellates basically, and the fungi is there. So as you can see is in this picture, so these are those particular organism that's basically feed on, that's what we call, that's a decomposing dead plants or the animal matter, right? So let me take you further. Now we have this last one, which is we call the parasitic feeding. So is in this type of nutrition, an organism derives food and nourishment from the other organism, right? So these are those organisms basically they get the nourishment or the derived food from the other organisms. So the organisms like which lives on the inside another organism is known as parasite. Okay, so there is a one-side relationship, there is no further intake of take and intake is there, it's a one-side relationship, that's the reason we call it parasite. Okay, while the organisms on which the parasite lives basically known as host. Okay, so on which these organism basically lives or from where they get the food, so that's organism known as the host or host body. Okay, in a long duration the parasite causes harm and even death of its host. Finally we have the feeding is in the hydra. So as you can see is in this picture, we have the picture of the hydra here. Okay, so these are we call the tentacles. So with the help of course the mouth, it's basically as you can see is in this adjoining picture, so the mouth part is here. Okay, it's basically maximize its body length, then simply attack on the prey, and is in this way the hydra basically prey and that's feed, right? So I hope that students is in this way you have understood now. So let me take you further here. This is the conclusion. So is in this way we'll say here the food is an important and indispensable component required for the maintaining the various mechanism of the living organism, right? So the food consumption depends upon on the availability and the food habits of course of that particular organism. So that's all about this class. So thank you so much student.